Hi everyone. Thanks to those who joined early. Um, I think we can get started. So thank you so much for tuning in our CTI webinar today. I'm very excited to kick us off with a few housekeeping notes, and then I'll hand it over to our speaker for intro. By the way, if you're not shy, feel free to let us know in the chat where you're dialing in from today. I love to know. Anyway, so first, the session is recorded, and you will receive the recording within 24 hours post-event. So if you if you run into any issues, if you don't get that email, please let me know. Email me at webinar@criticalstart.com and I'd be happy to assist you. Second, we love for this to be as interactive as possible. So when you see the poll pop-up window or when we get to like a poll slide, please engage with us. We love to know your response. And then lastly, again, use the chat for questions or the Q&A function. The more interactive, the better. Last but definitely not least, we are also giving away a 150 Amazon gift card to one lucky attendee. And you can simply enter the drawing by answering the poll questions or ask a question in the chat or in the Q&A function. Cool. So I'll stop talking now, and Tommy, I'll pass it off to you to get started.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, everyone, thank you for joining us today for our cyber threat intelligence team, their first half threat report. So for those who are new to Critical Start, our mission as an MDR provider is to revolutionize cybersecurity through those MDR solutions. At our core, we focus on minimizing the impact of breaches for our customers, while again ensuring that your business continues to operate. So we do achieve this through our own platform. We've developed Cyber Operations Risk and Response, combines human-driven expertise, AI-assisted threat detection, providing complete signal coverage across your environment. That's a little bit about who Critical Start is, a little bit about who I am. So my name is Tommy Scott. I'm the field CISO here at Critical Start. I am not a member of the cyber threat intelligence team that actually did all the work to produce this report, but it is my pleasure today to guide you through what some of those findings were at a high level. And then any questions we can answer today, I will. If I cannot, I'll make sure that we get you in touch with that cyber threat intelligence team. But given that, Crystal did just ask to have this be interactive, we did put a poll question right up front. So if you don't mind answering, or I believe in the chat, which of the following best describes your industry organization you operate in? Is it business and finance? Is it manufacturing, healthcare, supply chain, retail, etc.? Just let us know the vertical you're within, because it really helps kind of me understand, who our audience is today. So if you can drop that in the chat, I'll give you just a few seconds, and then we'll keep going. All right, while everyone's doing that in the background, just wanted to run through what our agenda is going to be today. Again, I believe we have an hour on the clock. We're not going to use all that time in terms of me talking, but if we do have interactive back and forth, absolutely, let's use the full hour. But I do want to start today with my talk track around industry outlook, looking at what sectors are most at risk. We'll profile what the most dominant threat actors and malware families are that we've seen throughout the first half of this year. And then moving on to analysis of kind of timeline, TTPs, what are the trends we see on not just when attackers are attacking, but how are they operating? And then finally, we'll finish with a look at trending concerns and what are our key recommendations, again, before opening up for that Q&A. So starting with the industry outlook. Kicking off, really wanted to present kind of first and foremost what the most significant finding was within the first half of 2025. And that's actually a pretty significant shift in who's being targeted the most. So for the first time, unfortunately, banking and finance has actually taken the top spot as the most targeted industry from January to June of this year, displacing who has held that top spot for many years running, and that's manufacturing. So this is driven, the reason why banking and finance has hit number one is driven by the high value of financial data, as well as this sector's rapid digitization inside their own organizations. But again, while manufacturing is no longer number one, they were a close second, followed by business services, retail, healthcare. Each of these industries facing their own unique risks. And again, today we'll take a little bit of a look at that, knowing that there is the full information contained within the report. First, shining the spotlight on banking and finance. Again, probably doesn't want to be in the spotlight, but why is it number one? Again, threat actors are drawn to the immense data wealth within this sector. We've seen the bad actors use a variety of tools that are fairly commonplace in terms of malicious activity. Network scanners like MassScan to perform that reconnaissance, establishing backdoors, establishing persistence with tools like Invisible Ferret, and then more importantly, how is that compromise happening? And it's really through exploitation of critical public-facing applications. Two of which are the ones we saw the most. First is going to be an authentication bypass within ConnectWise Screen Connect, which actually did achieve a perfect 10.0 in terms of severity of vulnerability, as well as a critical flaw within SAP NetWeaver. So these two vulnerabilities, again, were heavily abused to gain that initial access when thinking about malicious actors targeting banking and finance. Again, manufacturing is now number 2, but it's not by much. They still remain at the top of the list. And really, the reason they're targeted so much as a sector is because of that interconnectivity between OT and ICS systems, again, making disruption very incredibly costly. So attackers do heavily favor, typical techniques you would see living off the land. And the way they do that is using built-in tools that they know are going to be there, like PowerShell, for the malicious execution of the payload. So again, this accounts for about 21% of all observed activity. So you think 1 in 5 attacks are using PowerShell within the attacks we were able to see within the manufacturing sector. Unpatched vulnerabilities, unfortunately, again, Screen Connect comes up as one of the ones that was most heavily utilized. But we also saw Fortinet's EMS as the other vulnerability that was utilized, providing easy access points, again, within the behavior we observed within the manufacturing sector. Moving along to wrap up industry highlights and really rounding out that top 5, what we saw, again, it was business services, retail, and healthcare. Now, business services heavily targeted by email fraud. Email fraud has been a problem in this industry for quite a few years, and it remains so, accounting for nearly 44% of the incidents within the business services sector. Retail continues to be a hot target, attacks increasing 15% year over year, using that heavy reliance on PowerShell. Threat actors know it's there. It's going to be an easy way for them to perform the execution piece. And even though healthcare dropped to number 5, it does remain a very high priority target, with malware still being one of the most common attack vectors. At just over 1 in 3 attacks were observed utilizing malware. Now, we did talk about kind of the industries themselves, who was being targeted. Now I want to talk about who is doing the targeting. What threat actors, what malware families are we seeing being most prevalent? So in the first half of 2025, we saw a consolidation consolidation of power among a few key ransomware groups. So you've got Clop, you've got Akira, you've got Keelan, Ransom Hub, and Play. They really dominated that landscape together, combining for over 43% of all tracked incidents in the first half of the year. So what this really indicates is a maturing of the ecosystem where a few highly effective groups are actually responsible for a massive share of the attacks. But digging into kind of each of those specific threat actors, malware families, I wanted to look and see kind of what are we facing? What's that condensed view? So from Clop, consistently active threats. They did peak in February, but they did heavily target retail and manufacturing. Akira, still the second most prolific group, also focusing on manufacturing and professional services. Keelan maintained steady activity, again, one of the 5 that represented that 43% of all attacks. But Ransom Hub, top actor from late last year, actually fell down while still launching aggressive campaigns in the first half of this year to 4th place. And then finally, Play as a group did prove to be highly opportunistic, with a wide reach hitting manufacturing the hardest. And what's interesting, you'll see that each of these groups, while manufacturing overall may have fallen to second, each of these groups did target manufacturing. So while it's ranked second, it is still a highly targeted industry, and we'll talk about why that is here shortly. So I wanted to go into the timeline, the TTP trends, what are we seeing, really around understanding when and how adversaries operate, because that is crucial for proactive defense. Cybersecurity has always switched between proactive to reactive, but we really want to understand how can we provide the best proactive defense, And our analysis of first-party intelligence actually did reveal a couple of pretty clear patterns regarding the timing and techniques used by malicious actors. So first, we'll start with the timeline. And it may seem ironic, but attackers actually indicate they have a preferred work schedule. We did see a pretty heavy concentration of attacks between 1400 and 1700 UTC, and that aligns perfectly with the morning shift in the US and the later afternoon shift in the Europe. So perfectly aligned with peak business hours both in the US and Europe. So this window accounted for nearly a third of all critical alerts that were observed, with 1500 UTC being the absolute peak. Now, me being based in the central time zone, that's lunch. I find it fairly inconsiderate they'd try to attack while I'm enjoying my lunch break. But again, they're trying to intentionally blend in with legitimate user activity, making detection much harder. Historically, the idea was they attack after hours when no one's looking, but now they're trying to get lost in the noise, again, attacking during peak business hours. Looking at MITRE attack data, we do see a pretty clear three-step process. First, it's initial access. That's the primary focus. How can they get a foothold into the environment? That made up about 40% of all observed detections. But once inside, their next goal was, how do I get usernames and passwords? How can I steal credentials? And then when they had those credentials, again, they move on to execution, running their malicious code as a known good user. So this is a very structured attack lifecycle that we saw time and time again. Initial access, get credentials necessary to execute as a known good user. But one of the key things I wanted this group to take away is, how has the landscape shifted? And so for years, phishing is what everyone's been talking about. How can we prevent that as the number one initial access point? But now the use of valid accounts, simply logging in with stolen credentials, it has become the number one technique for access, with brute force attacks falling right behind it. So attackers have essentially realized it is much easier and stealthier to just walk in the front door with a stolen key rather than trying to break in through the side window. Did want to move next into some trending cybersecurity concerns that we're seeing. So malicious open source packages, we've really identified three major concerns. I think I've only said AI once, and again, we've got to say it at least 10 times for this to be a successful webinar. I kid, but we've seen three major concerns that'll shape the threat landscape for the rest of the year and beyond. So kicking off that concern, that list of concerns rather, is the growing threat we're seeing in the software supply chain. It's extremely amplified now by the advent and the usage of AI. So organizations are increasingly relying on open source packages to build their applications. But what this does is it does create a complex dependency chain that is often very difficult to secure. And while threat actors are actively exploiting this, they're doing so by injecting malicious code into popular open source repositories. That's the behavior we're seeing exhibited. But what's the new role of AI and how is this becoming a larger and larger risk to our customers? Really, it's by making the attacks faster and stealthier. So we've seen attackers, we've observed they're using AI to automatically identify vulnerabilities in these open source packages. They're generating convincing looking malicious code that mimics legitimate functions. And then even they go a step further and say, well, how can we ensure we don't get caught? And they're using AI to create fake developer profiles that will really start to build that trust within the open source community. This is happening much faster and much more stealthy. So as your organization's dependency on this open source ecosystem grows, of course, so does the risk. So one compromised package, it can have a cascading effect, creating a backdoor into your entire development pipeline and ultimately your production environment. While this is a key recommendation we'll go over later, again, quickly, we've got to start as an industry rigorously vetting all open source dependencies. We'll touch on that in detail in a moment, but I wanted to move to kind of the second major concern we've seen, and that's a significant shift in kind of social engineering landscape, the exploitation of communication and collaboration platforms. So for years, our security teams, we focused on how can we harden the email inbox? How can we make sure phishing doesn't continue to stay number one in terms of initial access? And to a large degree, I'd say there's been success there. As I said before, initial access, phishing is no longer number one. It's credential theft. But Our users have become more skeptical and suspicious of emails, and attackers know this. So what we've seen is the attackers, the malicious actors, are moving to channels where, trust is higher, so defenses are a little less mature. So what we've been seeing is a surge in phishing and malware delivery through platforms like Microsoft Teams, Slack, and even WhatsApp. And so finally, I wanted to end with, where we're seeing a dramatic and pretty concerning escalation in our industry is around geopolitical cyber warfare. So for years, state-sponsored activity was really focused on espionage. Can they steal data? Can they perform intellectual property theft and then utilize that to profit? That has fundamentally changed. So we've moved away from espionage towards disruption. So again, we're witnessing a significant shift towards direct attacks on critical infrastructure, including operational technology. So these attacks, again, aren't designed to steal information. They're designed to cause physical disruption, shut down power grids, halt manufacturing, prevent hospitals from delivering services, really impacting daily life. That is far more impactful to, states, countries, rather than just simple theft of proprietary data. And so again, the numbers aren't pretty. There was a 46% increase last year in incidents that did cause tangible physical disruption to OT and industrial control systems, with over 1,000 sites impacted that were documented. And so while this is no longer a theoretical threat, it's a reality. So as geopolitical tensions rise, we expect these disruptive attacks to become more attractive, more frequent, but more importantly, more severe. So OT resilience is skyrocketing up the list of recommendations we have regarding, it is a critical priority for any organization with an industrial footprint, and we'll expand on that momentarily. So starting to wrap up, we've talked about at a high level what's in the report, what are some findings, some interesting tidbits and statistics to really kind of shape what is the landscape we're looking at from a threat perspective. But what can you do about it? So based on these findings, we have come up with what we believe to be 5 key recommendations. And first and foremost, it is to treat identity as the new perimeter. Deploying the strongest phishing-resistant MFA, speaking as the field CISO at an MDR provider, this is critical. Where we see the most attacks, they start at the identity layer. That is becoming the primary initial access point. So treating that as the new perimeter is our first recommendation based on the findings we have throughout the first half of this year. Second is an evolution of ransomware strategy. So for years, it is if we're hit with ransomware, can we recover? And I would say we've done a really good job as an industry at putting in the mechanisms in place, the backup, the restoration capabilities that if ransomware occurs within our environments, we are able to effectively recover. But we believe that strategy needs to shift because we've done a good job on the recovery piece. It needs to shift towards, are we focusing on detecting that data theft? Not just we've been hit with ransomware, can we recover? Third, and again, what is arguably very important because it creates true disruption and physical harm is for those organizations that have an OT presence, operational technology, industrial control systems, it must be segmented properly from the IT environment. That IT OT convergence is not just happening, it's not theoretical, it's already here. And so being able to ensure you're segmenting IT from OT appropriately and getting visibility into those industrial protocols, that's why this OT resilience has made the list of top 5 recommendations based on our findings from the first half. Fourth is getting serious about software supply chain and vetting every component. This is not a task that's going to happen tomorrow, but starting to really vet open source dependencies, maintaining a software bill of materials, really understanding the applications in your environment and how are you utilizing open source packages to speed up development without increasing risk. And finally, the thing that often goes unsaid is time-based detection. What we saw throughout the trends of the first 6 months of this year was we need to ensure our team and our tools are at their highest state of alert during peak attack window, which was about 1400 to 1700 UTC. So as I mentioned, I was not a part of the cyber threat intelligence team that put this report together. There is a tremendous amount of data that is sitting within this report. We would love to send it to you. If you would like to have it sent to you, please let us know in the chat. Yes, we'd love to see it, but we did cover a lot of ground today. So I am very happy to answer any and all questions I can. Again, I serve as our field CISO here at Critical Start. But if I can't answer a question, I will make sure the representatives from that CTI team are able to get you the correct answers.
Thank
So
you,
I
Tommy,
will
for
stay on
the
the question
insight.
screen. Go ahead.
Yes, we do have a few questions. So the first one is, how can organizations spot ransomware earlier?
Yeah, absolutely. And so one, I mean, obviously there's it's time-based attacks, but for us, there's been a belief in the industry that ransomware, it pops up and your entire organization is encrypted. So for Critical Start as an MDR provider, there's an answer, and then I'll provide an answer as an industry as a whole. There are the initial indications of account compromise, identity-based alerts. And so for us, it's looking around on the identity side. Do we see suspicious behavior, suspicious logins? Do we see any unexpected O365 activity as an example? Because what we start to see are there's small, subtle tactics, techniques that are used before the execution. So if we think about that three-step attack, it's initial access, credential harvesting, and then execution. Creating enhanced detections on those first two pieces, that's really where we're able to, one, as an MDR provider, but two, as an industry, that's where we're able to make those detections that many tools would see as low fidelity. Because when you're compromising a known good credential, a lot of tools will say, well, this was expected because it's a known good user. I know I don't want to say zero trust because again, that's become somewhat of a marketing term, but it is, can you understand what's good for your users and get visibility into those more subtle tactics that are used before the ransomware is executed?
Awesome. Second question, what is your advice on how should we prepare for AI-driven attacks?
Yeah, absolutely. And so AI driven attacks, it's about risk profile within a customer organization. And so, again, I'm going to be speaking more as a field CISO rather than a critical start employee. What we've seen is AI driven attacks. They're not using novel concepts. They're just using speed as the advantage. Can you launch these attacks and find the weakest point? And today, the weakest point is identity. And so, building out a program that says, you know what, my risk profile, my risk appetite allows for automated identity responses. When we see behavior suspicious or malicious at an identity level, automatically disable that account. Because identity is the leading initial access mechanism, let's make the assumption that it's going to be bad. And then after investigation, you can undo that action, re-enable the account if necessary. We've seen that be the best way today to prevent AI driven attacks because they move fast. So we want to say, let's make the assumption it's going to be bad. And then if proven innocent, essentially, let's undo that action. Many organizations are comfortable with that because at an identity basis, disabling an end user account is not detrimental to either revenue or health and human safety. So that's what we see as today a very good defense mechanism. But again, how are white hat, how are we going to use AI to build better detections, to catch that more subtle activity faster? It's kind of we're both battling right now to see who can move the fastest. But our goal as an MDR provider, but also our recommendation in general is take response first if your risk appetite is going to facilitate that.
Awesome. I love that we're getting more questions. Thank you everybody for submitting their questions in the chat. So next up is from Nick. Why can we do more to fight phishing? Why can we set regulations that at least make it illegal for foreign entities such that they know we will come after them to the best of our ability versus just give up and say, well, if they are offshore, nothing we can do.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I actually want to read that question. I want to make sure I'm giving an accurate answer. Why can't we do more to fight phishing? Why can't we set regulations? Please make it legal for foreign such that they will come. Yeah, that's so I believe that's Nick's question, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. That's a very good question, and it is a very charged question as well. Um, it is something I probably would rather voice offline, but I'll say, just having worked for many multinational organizations myself on the customer side, there are a lot of sure geopolitical tensions. Why can we not make this? Why can't we simply ban it and say this is not allowed? But there are trade considerations. There is how do we work together as trade partners, and we cannot set certain rules without potentially rocking that boat. So it's a little bit of a deeper conversation, but that is the a big reason why I've seen working for multinational organizations is you have to be very aware of setting very hard lines can sometimes sound like accusations, and we want to make sure we are being very friendly with our trade partners. And so I will end it there before I potentially put myself in a bad position. But Nick, I would love to talk a little bit further if you are open to that.
Awesome. Thank you for the question, Nick. Next is from Angel. Is there a realistic use case for an AI-backed defense by using agents or automated workflows?
Yeah, absolutely. And so where AI fits is there are varying debates on capabilities and effectiveness. There's no doubt of efficiency, but where at least Critical Start sees it is AI is a phenomenal tool. We see it as a tool to make Critical Start more efficient and effective rather than a capability. So if you think about autonomous SOC, receiving alerts, performing investigations, making verdicts, and then taking responsive action, those are things that today, in the current state of what AI is or marketed as, those are all things that are possible, but it does leave quite a bit of risk that is unseen and unchecked. So the way that we see it is autonomous SOC is possible, but it still often doesn't match or meet the customer risk profile of do you want AI agents to be able to say, hey, I've run this investigation, I've made a decision, now I'm going to take response. There are a lot of our customers that are still a little uncomfortable with that. So how we've addressed it is more around the second part of your question, and that's automated workflows. If I know I can use, an identity-based action or identity-based alert as a good example. Identity-based alert comes in, there's impossible travel is a popular alert type with identity. It is just disable that account. That's an automated workflow. So automated versus autonomous. If your risk profile will accept that, absolutely create automated workflows to take response faster. That is a very realistic use case to battle against the speed and efficiency of AI from a malicious perspective. But what we've seen is there's still a hesitancy or lack of understanding or comfort from the industry as a whole to say we are fine with autonomous SOC performing those actions after having made a verdict without any human oversight or context added.
Hope that answered your question, Angel. Next, and this is the final one I see. So for those who still have questions, make sure you drop them in the chat. So Caesar asked, how are some ways to educate individuals outside of the technology field to understand the problems you spoke to today and the uses of Critical Start for those who don't understand the problems in security within the healthcare field?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, most of us on the phone have probably served as IT support desk for our families. We're in IT, we know how everything works. Um, and what I will say is while the popular LLMs, the Geminis, the ChatGPTs of the world, they've actually facilitated me to better explain why cybersecurity is relevant. Because just walking through, you ask ChatGPT to do something for you, it performs that action. That will impress a lot of people who are maybe uninformed from cybersecurity. But then you could have it start saying, "Hey, go pull all this information, do all these complex tasks," and then you start to see the magnitude and speed of which it can operate, and then just positioning it as, well, now my job as a cybersecurity professional is to prevent this really cool thing I just showed you from being used in a malicious way. It's not like it's a novel concept to say bad actors are going to act bad, but really being able to demonstrate the power and speed and efficiency of the popularly available LLMs, That's allowed me to show some of my family is like, hey, look how great this seems to you. Now imagine if I was using it in a malicious manner. And then it starts to just educate them on, oh wow, now maybe I'm not just going to put my whole life into this open LLM and I'm not going to put any private data because again, the security controls around it, that is what we're battling against. So just showing people what's possible has allowed me to kind of get a couple people start think about maybe I shouldn't do all these things. Maybe I shouldn't click the email that I received out of nowhere. Just expecting that there are bad actors out there and kind of seeing the power and speed at which they can move just creates awareness. That's been effective for me. But again, if educating people who are uninformed was 100% effective, our jobs would be a lot easier.
Awesome. Um, I don't see any questions. So with that, I will conclude this session. Again, thank you, Tommy, for an insightful session. And again, this is from our H1 2025 Threat Intelligence Report, and we do have the full report available to you. So if you have selected yes in the poll, we'll make sure to send you a copy. And feel free to always reach us offline if you have any questions. We'd be happy to assist you or send over like a representative your way to further the conversation. Again, yeah, with that, I will end this session. Thank you, everybody. See you at the next one. Take care.
Thank you.